Hello, here we are on another Sunday show. This one's going out on Friday. And today's guests are Laura Batty and her husband Scott. And they're going to talk about a patient perspective on cancer. What do I mean by this? I mean, Laura's actually been my patient, and she now seems to be terribly well. She's just climbed Kathmandu. And really what I want to do is not give the Chris Woollams view on what you need to build a great program and increase your survival, nor, as we had the other day, Patricia Pete's view. I want to hear the patient's view, and what we'll try and do is assemble a little program out of it as we get the answers, as we go through the answers. So anyway, good morning to both of you.
Hi there, Chris.
Morning, Chris.
Hello, everybody.
So let's start off by, why don't you explain to people what you had, this sudden diagnosis of cancer?
Yeah, so back in January 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer. I had a 5.5 centimetre tumour in the right part of my bowel, and we found out a bit later it had spread to 5 lymph nodes, and also there was other tumour deposits there and polyps as well. It was a shock diagnosis. My dad had been diagnosed 8 years prior, but he passed away, unfortunately, 4 years prior to my diagnosis. So I knew quite a bit about bowel cancer, done a lot of research, and that's kind of where I became aware of Chris's work, as my dad, unfortunately, wasn't able to tolerate chemotherapy by you. He had a DPD deficiency and it was toxic to him. So I did a lot of research on alternative, and as soon as I was diagnosed, I think literally a week after, I got in touch with him. We had a good chat about everything. But I did 6 months chemotherapy, oxaliplatin for 3 months, and capecitabine for 6 months. And thankfully, I've been in remission since then. So yeah, I've been quite fortunate to be in that position. And
so that's the kind of complete picture. Your dad had polyps too, didn't he?
Yes, I believe so. Really, at the time of his diagnosis, I recall a conversation, but I didn't really see the medical reports confirming that.
Because it can run families, polyps. It can run families and be a cause of colorectal. So let me go back here. So you already knew a fair bit, but most importantly, the doctors gave you a diagnosis. How did you feel? Did you get quick results or whatever? I was watching the BBC this morning, and there was a report on there about how you're supposed to be treated within 60 days. And it's gone from 92% of people being treated in 60 days down to something like 14%, according to the BBC. So were you treated quickly?
I was very fortunate through my work. I have private medical, so things were moved along extremely quickly. At the time when I had my diagnosis, I think I was booked in for the operation, I think 2 weeks later. So things.
Well, we did. Well, it was booked in, but then we put it on hold for a bit following one of our conversations, because we wanted to prep as best possible before the operation.
Yeah, but my colonoscopy was done like literally, I think, a week later. I was kind of in the system for the NHS as well, and when I had my operation, if I was on the NHS at the time, I just received my first letter for a chat about having a colonoscopy. So even this was back in January 2020, pre-COVID, that demonstrates the pressure that the NHS was under at that time. And obviously now I know people who are getting diagnosed.
So you were 38 then, is that right? You were 38? Yeah. And so they moved quickly, but did they, what was the level of information they gave you, or didn't it matter to you?
So we tried to find out as much information as possible, and I had a fantastic surgeon, to be honest, who was very open, but the plan was to remove 3/4 of my bowel, which seemed absolutely, it seemed quite extreme at the time.
One thing we did do as well, which we recommend people, is don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But we went and got a second opinion, because this surgeon, it's the first time we'd met him after we got the results, and he was, well, we'll cure it, we'll cut out a load of your bowel. But we went and got, we paid for a second opinion off a different surgeon, different consultant, provide them with all the information, and they pretty much said the same thing. Yeah, we recommend that, and the surgeon you got very well known and established. But yeah, as I say, always encourage people to ask a load of questions, get second opinions.
Definitely.
So did they ever at the outset tell you anything about diets or anything you could do yourself?
To be fair, my surgeon, when I asked about diet, he did say home cooked food is the best. But, you know, that was kind of the extent, really. You know, he was happy for me to take a multivitamin. I didn't really have a long conversation about other supplements, because I just knew that it wasn't really, you know, going to be something that he would advocate. So,
did you ask anybody, oncologists or anything, about supplements? Or
yeah,
the chemo, did they give you the milky sugary tea and the chocolate biscuit?
So yeah, it was, you know, you had biscuits with your tea, of course, which at the time I was doing the fasting. So I think the oncology nurses were always a bit concerned and a bit like, oh, you must eat, you know, and I was like, oh, I will do in a minute, it's okay. I did actually take some research papers into my oncologist. I'm trying to think what that was referring to now.
It was the taking the 3 months or 6 months of the chemotherapy.
Yeah, there was some actual supplements as well that I did, but yeah, they weren't on board basically at all.
And so there was no conversation with you about what might make your surgery go better or your chemotherapy work better or anything like that?
No. I think it was just kind of, let us do our job, and, you know, kind of get out of the way of that.
And what did they give you any idea on prognosis? I mean, given that it was in your lymph nodes, did they say anything to you about what they thought might happen? I
think just due to my inquisitive nature, I asked some, you know, difficult questions, let's just say, and done a lot of research. And I did ask the surgeon, and he did one of these, kind of put it into a computer, and this is kind of what you're looking at. But yeah, it was really, you know, just go for the surgery, and yeah.
It's very black and white, very matter of fact. This is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to
do. This is what we're going to do, but they gave you nothing around the outside whatsoever.
No.
Right,
and I don't think that
what would you say you learned from that part? I
think it's hugely important. I think that for me personally, I think stress was a big factor. My daughter was 2 at the time. I just returned to work. There was a lot going on, and previous to that I had a very stressful job for a number of years. My dad passed away. So I think there was a lot of factors and a lot of stress that had built up for a long time. So I think, you know, certainly getting that looked at and implementing ways to manage that is absolutely vital. Supplements, I think, you know, one of the first things I did when I spoke to you, what you recommended, was to have a full blood count and, you know, all of my levels checked, which I did immediately. And it did demonstrate that my vitamin D was very low. So that's something, you know, that I did manage quite quickly. And also just looking at other levels, you know, iron is something that has always been an issue.
So let's get it straight. You were diagnosed in about the January, weren't you?
Yes.
And pretty quickly you came to me, was it?
It was about 2 weeks later. So yes, it was
So that
very
was before any surgery.
correct.
Okay. Okay, so I was sort of trying to give you ideas then. So okay, so basically I would have helped you learn, but you learnt certain things that were important in your cancer that they hadn't told you. So how important do you think knowledge is to people? When people get cancer, let's say that chap down the road gets colorectal cancer, how important is knowledge apart from the doctor's knowledge?
It's absolutely paramount. I think building an absolute holistic program, not just the surgery. You've got to support your body. How can your body have such an extreme intervention, and if you're not strong enough to handle that? We looked at things like cimetidine, which was a very, very strong research, stops metastases when you are operated on. So, having that knowledge that I could take something that, scientifically there's papers to say it reduces the risk of metastases by operations by, I think it was 80%. There was absolute extreme figures there. So it really helped me mentally going in for the surgery to know that I was taking vitamins and doing things to make my mind and body strong.
I should explain to people we have research. I mean, I've told you about the Johns Hopkins research, but we have research from Japan that shows taking cimetidine, if you've just had a colorectal cancer surgery, about from day 7 for a year, actually doubles your survival chances. I mean, doubles your survival. It's not even like plus 5%, it doubles it. And things like vitamin D, we've got research with colorectal cancer, and it shows that the most important thing is to get your levels up as fast as possible. If you get them north of 100 nanomoles per liter, you actually increase your survival again there. I mean, there's a lot of research on this. So what else did you do up front? This is for the surgery. What else did you take for the surgery?
I did a lot of hyperbaric oxygen. This was just prior to COVID. So I was able to really get some sessions in. And actually, when I had the surgery, I remember they always did my SATs, and my oxygen SATs were always 99-100, and they were saying, "That's amazing. That's really, really good. We wouldn't expect that." And I did share the knowledge about hyperbaric oxygen, and it was like, it wasn't really.
Well, you were KRAS mutant. You're KRAS mutant, technically, although I don't believe in the word mutation. You've lost the message. And KRAS is actually attacked, if you like, wrong word, but by hyperbaric oxygen and things like vitamin C. We have the research on it.
Absolutely.
So it made a difference anyway, apart from that. So what else did you go on the standard fish oils because you had polyps?
I did. So I took 3 fish oils a day, 300, I think, 1,000 a day. Ashwagandha, that was introduced to bring my stress levels down. It's a very stressful time, obviously. And I think I just knew. I went into ultimate survival mode. And, that was from a research perspective. And, it's difficult going into survival researching because you might come across things you don't want to. But for me, it was knowledge is power. And I want to do absolutely everything I can to increase my odds.
I think mentally as well, when you obviously hear the news, it's absolutely devastating for Laura and whoever else when they get that diagnosis. You see the medical people, this is what we're doing, this is what the outcome's going to be. But when you do the knowledge and the research and it's all backed up by science and you're using that to help you, it gives you that a bit of control and confidence that what you're doing is going to help and achieve. And it's like, it is something that you can help and increase your chances yourself. And as I takes control of it as well, rather than it being this horrible thing that's completely evolving and you're never going to keep on top of it.
I mean, I was thinking about the fish oils thing. There's research from Leeds, of all places, medical school, about a triple fish oil. Once they start playing around with it, they have to call it a drug. But that actually restricts polyps in the body and stops polyps growing even, after the operation in other areas of the body. So that's really good for you. Did you ever say to them, this is what I'm doing? Did they ever ask what you were doing?
If I'm honest, I didn't. I knew what response I would get, so I didn't really share fully. Oh, Chris, have you frozen? Oh, sorry, I thought you'd frozen.
I just
we did talk some other stuff with the second oncologist, remember?
Yeah.
And he was very, quite, I mentioned that, but he was very, very dismissive about the research. We provided him with some papers. I think it was when you were talking about the chemo and going from 6 to 3 and reducing the chances, the marginal amount. But he was completely dismissive of the research and was like, no, stick to this.
All right, let's explain that to everybody. What you did was you had cisplatin.
We had oxaliplatin.
Oxaliplatin and capecitabine. Sorry, I apologize. You had oxaliplatin and capecitabine. And oxaliplatin, you found out that there was research that the difference between having it for 3 rounds and 6 rounds was actually marginal. So you'd rather go with 3 rounds. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So
3 months and 6
3 months and 6 months. It's called the Scott study, SCOTT in the UK, and worldwide, I can't think what the actual worldwide is. IDEA, so it's IDEA study, and they pulled a lot of information over oxaliplatin and 5-FU use for colorectal cancer patients, stage 3, stage 2, all over the world, and they've broken it down between lymph nodes. It's a very, very detailed study, but it gives you the information of what the effectiveness is on 3 months 5-FU versus 6 months 5-FU against capecitabine, against oxaliplatin. So that information is there, but oncologists, I think, mainly are recommending still, if you've got more than, I think, 4 lymph nodes, for 6 months oxaliplatin and for 6 months 5-FU capecitabine. So I think then it's having a look at those papers and making that decision, because oxaliplatin can cause lifelong neuropathy and a whole host of other issues.
I think that's, we ought to explain it to people. I think oxaliplatin can almost cause neuropathy from the first dose, and certainly over time can definitely cause neuropathy. So actually taking it for only 3 doses or 3 months wasn't just because the figures showed it was just as good as 6 months, but it was also far less likely to give you neuropathy.
Correct.
And capecitabine is the pill form of 5-FU, which is one of their favorite drugs for colorectal cancer.
Correct.
Okay. So you took 3 months of each of them, 3 months of oxaliplatin, then on to 3 months of capecitabine.
6 months capecitabine.
Capecitabine for 6 months. Did you run it with the oxaliplatin as well, or just afterwards?
So I did 3 months oxaliplatin with the capecitabine, and then the capecitabine on its own for 3 months after.
Okay. And did anybody tell you what you could or couldn't take with oxaliplatin? Like you can't eat grapefruit, you can't eat grapefruit juice, you can't, eat large oranges or anything like that?
No, that wasn't explained at all. No.
Because of a gene called CYP3A4. So technically, if you were to eat grapefruit, drink grapefruit juice, eat large oranges, you'll get far worse reaction to those drugs. Those foods can concentrate those drugs or weaken them.
Interesting. People would think getting their vitamin C levels up, so they probably would have a lot of orange.
There are a lot of drugs that are affected positively or negatively by grapefruit juice, and large oranges and pomelos. That's the other one. And there are
Right.
see, the other thing too is there are some drugs. A lot of people with cancer take antidepressants, and there's a group of antidepressants, about 4 or 5 of them, which you mustn't eat things like eggs and salami and ham and bacon with. And some antidepressants do react with the drugs. No one ever tells you this. So the oncologist might say to you, I don't want you taking any of those nasty supplements, but then don't tell you what's on the front page of the website of the drugs company, which is what foods you can't eat. It's bizarre. It just proves my theory. My theory is, let's be nice to them. They don't have time to read. All right. So you finished the drugs and you took supplements around the outside. What would you like to tell people about the supplements you took with the drugs?
Oh yeah, so I took a whole host of supplements, adding to the ones I mentioned earlier, vitamin D, berberine, Hinokial. That was another one that seemed to have really good research around it. I did some research because I'm CRAS mutant, as you mentioned earlier. Bromelain, or I might have pronounced that wrong, bromelain. That was something that I read a lot about, so that was another supplement I took.
Say that word again.
Bromelain.
Bromelain, yeah.
So I think that might be great. That's pineapple, I think. But again, that had good research for CRAS.
Pineapples.
Yes. But also, juicing, as I mentioned earlier, fasting. I did, well, actually, hyperbaric oxygen has stopped because, of course, COVID had come in. So there's things like Wim Hof breathing to try and,
It's a shame. It's a shame about the COVID, because I like people to do hyperbaric oxygen and fasting over their IV, because it really does reduce the uptake of toxins from the chemo, and you get less neuropathy and things like that. I do like that.
Yeah.
But everything changed with COVID.
No, I know it was a weird time.
So you did the cimetidines for a year, and so that's cancer cells. We ought to explain to people, cancer cells take on board histamines, and that makes them grow larger and stickier and become more aggressive, so they go around the body and stick to things and form new tumors. And so taking an antihistamine like cimetidine is a really good idea if you've got colorectal cancer, you just had surgery. And Hinokial is really good at attacking cancer cells in the lymph, and killing some of them. So that's how cancer spreads anyway, goes through the lymph, 90% of cells. So they were all good things you did, So what then happened after your chemo's finished? Did they scan you? Did they tell you were clear, or?
Yeah, so gosh, we had some scares along the way. We had a scan midway through. I had a dot on my lung, so it was never established at the time whether that was a metastasis, or whether, it was just some scarring from years ago. So I had to have a scan midway through to see if that had shrunk due to the chemo. If it shrunk, obviously it would be a tumor. And then after the operation, I was in absolute agony. 2 weeks later, they found an ovarian cyst, which I'd never had before in my life. So there was a question over that, and then I had 2 big dots, or how they describe it, on my liver, 2 centimeters each, just after my operation. So again, they thought that might be spread, but it wasn't. That was inflammation. So there was a lot going on, a lot of scans, PET scans, CT scans, MRI scans, and then finally finished the chemo. And then I had a final scan after that, and that was all clear. And then since then, the dot on my lung hasn't grown. So I've probably had about 3, 4 maybe scans since.
But just on the scans as well, when Laura had those and she was complaining of these sort of pains, and a lot of the time they were like, well, don't worry about it, it's normal, it'll go away. But Laura was like quite insistent and pushing for scans.
Yeah.
So don't accept their first answer. Push back, make a bit of a fuss about it. If it gives you peace of mind and helps with your stress levels and gives you that comfort that there's nothing there, it's definitely worth pursuing.
So how would you say you deal with scares? Because you have three quite big scares. How
Yeah.
do you deal with them, or what would you advise people do with scares? Ignore them?
I
Treat them?
can't say I dealt with them very well at the time. It was COVID, and it was a scary time, to be honest. But I think that it is just having a perspective on it, and just anything that you can do. If you can meditate, it sounds difficult, when you're waiting on results and things. But yeah, I think you've just got to get through it.
So what was Scott's role in all this? Scott must have played an important role.
Oh, God.
No, it's obviously Laura was the one in a position getting the diagnosis. It's one of them. You hear the words at first, and it's like you're in shock for a while. But I think all you can do is, it's just sort of a lot of the time you have to listen. It's a very stressful time. Laura was doing a lot of research. I think it's helped massively. I'll be honest. At first, I was probably a bit more of a logical person, so I was more, well, let's listen to the doctors and see what they say. But the more Laura investigated it, looked at it, we met and spoke a few times. I was a lot more open-minded to it and encouraging Laura to do her research, and we go along with the things that were suggested, and it's all backed by research, the stuff that you provide. So it's all factual, it works. And I think, you've just got to just sort of be there and listen. And it's not great, but just try and be as supportive as possible.
You see, I think I probably said it to you, but I always see my job as being boringly thorough and giving you the facts and actually being quite capable of backing it up with research to anybody. But I always say that Laura's job is to be determined. The patient's job is to be determined, and that's one of the reasons I wanted you on this show, because I've never seen anybody quite as determined as you, and I think you were right from the word go. You were determined to beat it. But I also would have said that Scott's job is to be positive, to be the man who gives you the support, because you can't be positive all the time. And this is what people don't understand. And I think even Patricia and I were talking about the other day. I get really upset when the nurse comes up to my patients and says, "Now be positive, dear," because I tell my patients, no, turn around to her and say, "No, that's your job. Your job's to be positive. My job's just to be determined and get it done." It's impossible for you to be positive all the time. I mean, that's why you need a partner. You need some support that is positive for you in your downtimes when you're scared and things like that.
Absolutely. And there's no denying, as a cancer patient, there are those moments, of very, very dark moments, and I think that's natural. And I think sometimes there is that culture of toxic positivity, as you say, where people are like, "You've got this, and you can," and I think naturally you are going to have those moments when you walk into that dark room and all you can see is the negative stuff. But I think for me, I had to turn that fear into almost empowerment, that this isn't going to beat me, or actually I'm just going to do everything within my capabilities to, and I know you've used this analogy before, just shutting the doors. And I think actually if you can shut all the doors, you can't do anything else. And I know, worrying, then done everything you can do. And I think at that point, I know it sounds like the most ridiculous thing, but it's kind of letting go. That probably sounds, a bit toxic positivity, but just doing everything in your power, but then just kind of like, yeah.
All right. I mean, you're interested me on something which I hadn't thought of before, which is you did lots of research.
Yeah.
But again, what I always found, I mean, once you got the research, that was it. You did it. That's why I say you were determined. I get very worried about people. I get a number of women with breast cancer, for example, who I think become professional cancer patients and they are so worried that they might be missing something. They're always reading. Literally, I've got a couple of Americans at the moment who, from the moment they get up to the moment they go to bed, are reading about other things they could be doing. And the husbands, when I say, I don't want you becoming a professional cancer patient, to the lady, the husbands back me up. And they think that's the real problem. And I don't think those people ever actually beat their cancer. Whereas what I always thought about you is you got the research and you, at that moment, you turned off. You said, right, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And you turned off. And you've got a life. What I like is, I think you've got to have a life outside of cancer. I always tell people to sort of write their plan, stick it on the fridge door, and then get on with their life. 95%, of their days should be enjoying themselves, playing with the kids, doing things. Do you agree with that, or would you say it's very hard?
I think it's vital. I think, as you say, you can get sucked in and you can just be absorbed by cancer and everything relating to it, which at some points I was, but I was able to get away from that. But I think I did learn in the end, life is for living, and you've got to find, as cheesy as it sounds, the joy in each day. And even if it is just going for a walk in the park and just feeling the sunshine on your face and just enjoying that moment, but also I think setting yourself targets. So for me, I've got a daughter, and visualizing even her 21st birthday party and things like that, just things to keep you going. And I've just trekked up Kilimanjaro, and going for walks. I've just realized how much I loved walking through lockdown, and that gave me a new passion. And I think it is just embracing things that
all right. What about the other side of it? What about you'd had the surgery, you'd had the drugs. What did you do then? Because I always say now's the time to start.
So looking at the microbiome was a very key thing. So that was the thing that I got onto very quickly. So did a gut kill, so killed off the bad bugs that might be around. And I know you're a real proponent on that, Chris, and learned so much from you there. And then rebuilding the gut, so introducing good gut food, so things that have good bugs in there. I did what's called an atlas test, so that just mapping of your gut microbiome, which I know we've had a few chats about, and there's a few questionable things on there. But I think again, it's knowledge and empowerment to an extent, and they were tangible things that I could then control and do, and rainbow diet, and embracing more of a healthy life, and then introducing things like infrared sauna, hyperbaric oxygen. But in the main, I think it is what we just discussed. It is the fact that you need to find your happiness, your life purpose, and step away from that cancer room for a bit, and and just enjoy life.
There was very interesting research just recently, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't know whether you saw it. I put it out on my e-news, and it was saying that it was women with breast cancer, and it said if women with breast cancer still have an unhealthy microbiome, they get more metastasis and survive least. So you've got to fix the microbiome. And we kill the bad guys as you did, and then we add all the good guys back in and give you things like butyrate. Butyrate is really important for colorectal cancer. It kind of brings it all together. Okay, let's do stress then. What sort of things did you do for stress management? Because I mean, people watching this may not know, but basically cancer research says that stress has got nothing to do with cancer, which is crackers. Tosh. And we know stress puts your blood sugar up. We know stress puts your gut bacteria down. We know that stress actually turns on something called COX-2, which is a big player in colorectal cancer. So if you turn on COX-2, you get much higher cortisol, much higher adrenaline, and these both cause highly inflammatory hormones to be made in your gut. So we know that stress is a big player in your cancer. So what did you do?
Oh gosh, yeah, I did a lot of things. I spoke to Fiona Shaquila Burns and had a few sessions with her, which were really quite useful. So she uses interesting things like matrix imprinting, which is going back to past things that have happened and almost rewiring the brain. I think it's Bruce Lipton based program, and tapping is something that's very useful for stressful moments, tapping on meridian points. EFT, I think they call it, emotional freedom technique. Meditation was something that I did introduce, and it started off with things like the Headspace app, which I found really useful, and then going into
meditation before you got the cancer at all? Done? No, but you do Reiki.
I've learned Reiki since. So yeah, I'm qualified in Reiki now, which I use mainly on myself and some friends and family. But yeah, I find again, it's the energy in your body. If you're holding stress, tension, and to me, it totally makes sense that if your energy isn't flowing throughout your body and you have issues in certain areas, they are going to manifest. And so that really helped. And I did kind of immerse myself in the works of like Joe Dispenza. I found that really, really interesting. Bruce Lipton, the power of thought and intention. And yeah, it did kind of really give me a different perspective on things.
Yes, I think the best thing really is this whole idea that you've got to get on with your life and see your daughter's 21st and things like this.
Yeah.
That's I mean, I think cancer's got to be put in its box as fast as possible. And I think people are going to do, listening to you, I think when you do the research, is to find something out and put cancer in its box. So it's not to do some research and then do more research the next day and do more research. That's not what you need to become. You don't need to become a researcher. That's my job, if anything. But it's to actually find something, and when you found it, that puts cancer in its box, and you can move on and get on with your life. I think is what you're saying.
It is, yeah, and I did dabble with a lot of the energy healing and all that kind of thing. But I think you're right, Chris. I think ultimately it's getting on with your life, and yeah, as I said earlier, just finding joy day to day.
I used to write about energy and chakras and everything else.
Yeah.
Skeptics used to come after me big time, but they can't come after me anymore because the people doing all the research on chakras and energy are NASA.
Because,
yes. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but you have to have I think you have to have something like a frequency, a body frequency of about 5 and a bit, 5.2 or something, and to be healthy. And if you're standing up, you're at 7.5, but if you're sitting down, you're 4.5. So whilst you're sitting down in a rocket going to the moon, you're being unhealthy the whole way there and the whole way back. So it's just things like the rate things spin out. You mentioned Bruce Lipton. Bruce Lipton wrote a book called The Biology of Belief.
Yeah.
And basically, he's a cellular biologist. And what he said was, if your electrons are spinning around atoms like that, and it's all crazy, and you're stressed and whatever, they're going to be doing exactly the same in your liver. And I tried to get him on the show actually. And but if you visualize nice things and everything, so you'll calm your electrons down, and they'll spin a different way, and that's what will happen in your liver too. So he's very much the power of belief, the biology of belief actually transforms into your organs, not just in your hypothalamus or wherever it is. So I am very into the biology of belief because as I did on the original show on the first Sunday, I don't think anybody's terminal. I think everybody can beat their cancer. And the reason it started with me was the first 3 people I ever helped all beat their cancer. They were all given 3 months and they're all alive today, 20 years on. So why would I think there's terminal cancer in the world? I think everybody can beat their cancer. Do you think that?
I think it's ultimately just doing everything you possibly can, but it's a balance, isn't it? Yeah. I think it's doing what you can, shutting the doors, but then getting on with your life and having that joy and happiness and accepting that you've kind of done everything you can.
In no particular order, I've got number 1, gain knowledge. Number 2, I've got support for the dark moments.
Yeah.
Number 3, I've got get on with your life, your other life. Don't be absorbed by your cancer. Life is for living. Number 4, I've got set targets in your life, so you're visualizing something in the future. Number 5, I've got repair the microbiome after everything. Number 6, I've got manage your stress. Yeah.
Yes.
And meditation and energy and so on. And last but not least, I've got do everything you possibly can.
Yes, that's a good summary.
Anything I've missed off? Scott, got anything else?
No, I think you've got it there. As I think knowledge is massively key. I think that mentally that gives you that
It's
control and confidence that you can defeat it.
About the first or second page of the first book I ever wrote, Everything You Need to Know, literally the first edition, it says, there's a saying that knowledge is power. In cancer, knowledge is the difference between life and death.
I think one of the key things ultimately is advocating for yourself in the medical world as well. And I know it's been extremely tough with COVID. People have had operations cancelled and scans are taking 6 weeks plus for results. And, it's just horrendous. But I think where you can, it's advocating for yourself and having that voice and not just, being passive and not wanting to ruffle any feathers. I think, when you're talking about your life, you have to find that fire in your gut.
When you go back to the hospital, do they ever say anything to you? Because you're saying advocate for yourself. Okay.
Oh, no, not her again.
To be honest, I think my surgeon is amazing, and but I think he thinks I'm a bit of a pain because I ask all the questions, and I can just imagine him like, oh no, not her again. But it's your life, isn't it? You'd negotiate on a car, or you get a second opinion about something far less trivial, and yet when we're in this situation, we just want to, it feels the easiest thing sometimes to just accept what we're being told, and sometimes it's challenging that and just finding your voice to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Some people do accept. I think especially men, it's just kind of give me the pill, give me the treatment, get it over with. I think men are much more than women.
Yeah.
I just think that there are other things that can make a big difference, and it's finding the right things, not just for your cancer, but for you. There's a saying in golf: don't play the shot you think you can play the shot you know you can play. And I think I say that to women. I say, look, there's 4 or 5 things you can do to get your oxygen up to 99. Do the one you know you can do. Don't think, oh, Chris Woollams told me to take exercise. I mean, it's just not right. If someone's 83, they're not about to go for a jog. They're not. So do the thing you think you can do. Do the thing for other you know you can do, not the one you think you can do. That's why I think they're called personal prescriptions. I think you have to build something for that person sitting in front of you. And I got right from the start that you like research, so I gave you the research. But other people, they'd be turned off by it. I just say, look, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, it has to be tailored. Absolutely. We're all wired differently.
Well, I wish you many more years of health.
Thank
I
you.
learned a lot from you actually, and I thank you for coming on the show, and I hope I will list these things on the show. I think on behalf of everybody watching this, I think we thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
It's lovely to see you again. I always remember you
thank you.
writing to me and saying something like, "I'm now cured," or "I'm now much better. I don't have any problems, but I miss our chats." I thought,
I know, I do. It was yeah, it was lovely to have a and it did become a bit regular actually, didn't it? There was always something.
well, but it worked. It worked. Well, I've got a very famous lady in America. She's now had 3 PPs and 3 follow-ups, but here she is 5 years down the line, completely cured. So do what it takes. That's the answer, isn't it? Anyway, look, thank you for your time, guys. It's really, really kind of you. Everybody out there learnt some of this. I certainly did something from this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.